I'm here on behalf of the Latin American Legal Defense and Education Fund. We are a nonprofit advocacy group working to protect the civil rights of immigrants in our region. We can't let the atrocity of 9/11 continue to let American public policy be driven by fear and prejudice. TRU-ID will further marginalize the poor, the homeless, those in the process of re-entry in society after incarceration or recovering from addiction, immigrants, the young and the old, and make it even more difficult for them to access basic services and resources and restrict their freedom of movement. Beyond its impact on the most vulnerable members of our communities, Real ID, which is what TRU-ID is, poses a threat to everyone because our right to privacy will be further imperiled by the creation of a gigantic database of personal sensitive information subject to abuse and manipulation by government agencies and corporate interest. Real ID is a real bad idea.
Thanks to the ACLU for bringing this to us, because the truth is that the American Friends Service Committee came out against Real ID back in 2005 when it was passed. We also challenged a 6-point system when it was first implemented, but because we're so inundated with so many issues that this would have slipped right past us. So I really do want to commend the ACLU for bringing it forward and for recognizing that these types of very limited restrictions on documentation are going to be devastating for New Jersey's immigrant communities and beyond. And when I talk about New Jersey's immigrant communities, I mean anybody who's foreign born, who's living in the United States, who is not a citizen of this country, right? So foreign born, not a naturalized citizen. There are a myriad of immigration statuses that people can have. They come with different types of documents, they come with different types of identification, they come with different terms of duration, right? They're not necessarily valid for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It depends on the type of status you have. As a professor of immigration law, I use a textbook where the first sentence of the textbook is, "The Immigration and Nationality Act is a hideous creature." By allowing DMV agents, motor vehicle agents, to look at immigration status or to determine whether somebody is here lawfully, that is a crisis. That is absolutely impossible for somebody who's not trained in immigration issues to do. And for people who are here lawfully, it's often extremely difficult to obtain the types of documentation that are required in TRU-ID. So, you know, for an immigrant victim of domestic violence, for example, who might be here lawfully, he or she may not have access to the documents needed to present in order to get this type of license. A person who's here on temporary protected status, many of you probably don't even know what that is, supposedly short-term status granted by the government to people from certain countries. My office just filed renewal applications for temporary protected status for people from El Salvador. In one day, we received 10 mistaken work permits where they were only valid for 1 day. Huge mistake. They're going to be fixed, but it's going to take 2 or 3 months for those documents to be fixed. What happens to somebody who's trying to renew their driver's license with this kind of complicated issue? So access to documentation is particularly difficult for all of us, particularly difficult for U.S. citizens. For an immigrant in this country, in New Jersey, and you may know New Jersey continues to have the 6th highest immigrant population in the country, this is going to be absolutely impossible, and we are going to see hours and hours and hours needed to try to advocate with individual agencies at motor vehicles to try to ensure that people have access to the licenses that they need. Thank you.
I want to begin with the perspective of a homeless person, particularly a long-term homeless person. Many people who are experiencing homelessness have lost their birth certificate or had it stolen while they were in shelter. This is very common, we find, among people we work with. Many of them cannot prove residency in New Jersey due to the lack of a physical address. Others have not received recent mail that could establish an address. There are many costs associated with getting an ID, such as the $25 to obtain a New Jersey birth certificate, and even more for an out-of-state birth, which are beyond the reach of a person who is homeless. You add that all up and you discover that a homeless person is hard-pressed to get the 6 points necessary to even get a state ID in the current system. What we do in Mercer is we help our folks who are homeless obtain a county ID, which takes less points than the county photo ID and then they have at least have a photo ID so that they don't get harassed on the street by law enforcement officials or even detained when they lack a photo ID. So what we think that the TRU-ID does is it adds even more burdens to the person who is homeless, and this is in essence simply adding insult to injury. People experiencing homelessness need extra assistance to get an ID from supportive agencies, not extra burdens imposed by the state. Thank you.
Although TRU-ID is being implemented by the Motor Vehicle Commission as part of the federal Real ID program to make New Jersey safer, the reality is that victims and survivors of domestic violence will become less safe by its implementation. For victims who have left or are attempting to leave their abusers, it is all too common that many of their most important personal documents will have been taken and hidden by their abusers as a control tactic. TRU-ID will make it harder by limiting the types of documents that can be used to obtain a license. A driver's license for many victims is a way for them to escape a life-threatening situation. Making it harder for victims to access a driver's license will make it even more difficult for many to leave their abusers and also to start anew if they have left. TRU-ID will require that everyone's address be placed in their new driver's licenses. Up until now, victims of domestic violence in New Jersey have been able to use an alternative address on their licenses. It is currently unclear whether victims of domestic violence will be able to continue to do so as part of the TRU-ID program. TRU-ID will also link New Jersey's license holders' information to other states and require that MVC scan and keep on file victims' identifying documentation such as birth certificates. If the appropriate security measures are not taken, a domestic violence victim's confidentiality and safety can be threatened. Linking a victim of domestic violence information across the country creates a huge safety concern. By allowing the MVC to keep and link so much information, any blip in the system can jeopardize a victim's location and safety. It is unclear what steps will be taken by the MVC to protect this information. The TRU-ID license will also contain a common machine-readable strip that, once scanned, can record all the information on the license. For victims, their confidentiality is a means of maintaining their safety. Having a machine-readable strip will make it easy for any third party to quickly retain this information. This information can then be sold to other third parties and disseminated to the public, thus further compromising a victim's safety. NJCBW hopes that as a result of the ACLU's efforts, New Jersey will either allow public comment on TRU-ID's implementation, or that New Jersey will join the other states that have already outwardly opposed the implementation of the federal Real ID program based on similar concerns. Thanks.
Thank you. The New Jersey Coalition Against Sexual Assault represents the 22 sexual violence programs in New Jersey, as well as the survivors that are served by them. We oppose the implementation of Real ID or TRU-ID as it is in New Jersey. Echoing many of Mark's concerns, we have serious concerns about the ability of the state to allow survivors of sexual violence and stalking to effectively use an alternate address, as they are currently allowed to by law. Using an alternate address on their driver's license is how many survivors avoid a perpetrator or offender finding them, either after the person is out of jail or just in general, because, as you know, many don't go to jail. This also, as Mark mentioned, presents a barrier to survivors of sexual violence who are also survivors of domestic violence in obtaining an alternate license. In addition, NJ CASA is very concerned about the cost to the state in implementing this program. In light of New Jersey's budget and the cuts to many programs, in particular sexual violence programs over the past few years, this does not seem like the best use of funds. NJ CASA, in sum, opposes the implementation of Real ID or TRU-ID, and we thank the ACLU for their efforts on this behalf.
As the state's largest consumer watchdog organization, over the last 4 years, we have counseled thousands and thousands of families facing loss of their homes due to foreclosure. Some of them have had their homes stolen from them due to forgery, scammers, and robo-signers. Additionally, while counseling folks, we have also provided community education to thousands of seniors to protect them from being victims of identity theft. By turning the driver's license into a national identity document, TRU-ID would subject folks to an enormous amount of invasion of their personal privacy and open them up to potential of identity theft. Additionally, it would create a huge bureaucratic hassle for individuals and finally place an undue tax burden on the citizens of New Jersey. So for that, we urge that the implementation not take place and that public hearings be held. Thank you.